Welcome to a new year of This Week in the Regency. I decided to start the year with the biggest possible Regency personality, Lord Byron. Now, I've always been slightly prejudiced against Byron for two reasons. I like his lyric poetry, but his long-form poetry, like Don Juan and Childe Harold, they feature main characters who are really quite unpleasant. So, I never really liked them all that much. I admire the skill, extraordinary skill in writing, but... And then the second reason is that Georgette Hare disapproves of Byron. It's quite clear that she thinks he's a poseur. And particularly dislikes the way he would go to dinner at someone's house and then insist on eating boiled potatoes and vinegar. So I came to this with maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll find out about Byron and I will decide actually he's a good person, Yeah, no, he's just appalling. Before I get to why he's just appalling, I'll tell you a little bit about him. So he was born of the second marriage of his father, Mad Jack Byron. He was of a noble house, a house indeed that goes back to the Conqueror, to William the Conqueror. The family's in the Domesday Book. And his mother, Catherine Byron née Gordon, was of the Gordon clan, a very well-established Scottish clan. She was the second wife. The first died. And it's clear that both sides of the family have some mental instability in them. His mother was rather odd. There were various accounts of whether or not she was an alcoholic, but she was certainly unpredictable, I think is the kindest way to put it. So, maybe going to Harrow, which is where he went to school, was a bit of a relief. And certainly in Harrow he started his sexual adventures, although there is some evidence that he was sexually abused as a child by both a woman and a man. We don't know what he thought about that much, but because his biography, he had an authorized biography, but apparently it was so shocking that it was burnt after his death before it could be published. So that would be one of the books you'd want to save from history, right? Anyway, so he went off to Harrow. He wasn't that bright a student, apparently, but he was sexually involved with several of his schoolmates. And, possibly he is of that type of person who kind of fixes on a specific kind of person to be attracted to, because there is no doubt that in his adult life he was attracted to young people. And this is the point at which I go complete a-hole. So he goes to Harrow, he goes to Trinity. To give you an idea of what kind of person he was at Trinity College, for university, he wanted a dog. And the nicest thing I can say about Byron is he liked animals. He really did. He filled his house with them, and I mean filled his house with them, all kinds of animals, including cranes, and the servants must have had a terrible life, because all these animals were allowed free range, wild animals, right? We're not talking about just dogs and cats here. But he did love animals, and he wanted a dog, and they wouldn't let him have a dog because it was against the rules, and so he bought a bear. So he did have a sense of humour, because there were no rules against having a bear as a pet. And and he left there, and he was always writing, and he comes to be part of society, part of the ton. And by the time he's 25, in 1813, he is a star. And he's the kind of star, if you think about rock stars in the 70s, that's the kind of star he is. He's a celebrity. He's a celebrity quite young. He acts as though he has a lot of money, even though he doesn't. Remembering that the way poetry or novels worked in that time is that you sold the novel or the poetry, the book of poetry, you sold it to a publisher for a flat fee. And after that, it didn't matter how many copies you sold, that was it, you didn't get anything else. So the fact that he suddenly became an overnight sensation really didn't matter in terms of his income. He wasn't getting any more income from that. And he had very extravagant tastes, like our last Regency personality, Bryon, who didn't really approve of him, I have to say. They were similar in their ability to spend money. And so he had to run away to the continent to avoid his creditors. And prior to that, he embarked on one of those affairs, one of those many, many, many affairs that caused scandal. And I'm talking here, I'm only going to talk about one of them, and that is Lady Caroline Lamb. And that's because of a number of reasons. First, because she came up with mad, bad, and dangerous to know, which is such a great line. And she called him that when she first met him. She didn't like him at first. It's a real kind of enemies to lovers story, because they did eventually become lovers. And then she got obsessed and became a complete stalker. Now, did he treat her badly? Almost certainly. He treated everybody badly. Why would she be any different? But she became really, like, completely obsessed with him. She would dress as a boy and pretend to be his page, which was incredibly... Remembering all the time that she's married at this point. And she was married when they first met. And basically she destroyed her own life because of him. I'm not blaming him for that. You know, she made the choice to get involved with him in the first place, and she made the choice to continue to be a stalker, but it certainly caused an enormous kerfuffle. And the Lambs really were just, remembering they're a really important family politically as well. It was mortifying for them, and probably today, you know, she would have been taken off for rehab, almost certainly using drugs, because they did. It was all legal. Everything was legal. So what do we know about him that's good? Well, he was one of the people on the night when Percy Shelley himself, Mary Shelley's half-sister Claire, and a man called Polidori, Dr. Polidori, on Lake Geneva, in a house on Lake Geneva. There was a wild, windy night. It was very scary. And they challenged each other to write the scariest possible story. And this was during a summer of where they just took drugs and had sex a lot, basically. Again, imagine like a rock band having a holiday. That's what they were doing. And only two people kept writing. One of them was Mary Shelley, and she produced Frankenstein. And the other was Polidori, John Polidori, and he produced The Vampire. Was the basic principle. I mean, you can draw a direct line from The Vampire through to, say, Twilight or Interview with a Vampire or any of those. He established the canon, which Dracula just developed a little bit further. So, really important night. He was part of that. Big tick. The other thing we like about him is that he had a daughter called Ada Lovelace. He was married, not successfully, she left. But there was a girl called Ada, and she became one of the foremost mathematicians of her time, worked with Charles Babbage on the difference engine, and is accounted one of the very, very first computer programmers. So I find it interesting that the things that are good in Byron's life come out of his relationship with women, and also the bad. So why do I dislike him so much? Well, he went off to Greece, and he was involved there with the Greek fight for independence from Turkey, from the Ottoman Empire. And I have to say at this point that he is an absolute national hero in Greece, because he devoted a lot of his own money and time and also brought a lot of attention to the problem. But two encounters there which really were documented show me why I don't like him. The first is that he died. When he died, he was in a relationship with a 15-year-old boy whom he had taken from his parents, and who subsequently died in poverty 6 months after Byron's death. So he didn't make sure he was okay. He didn't take him back to his own parents or anything like that. And secondly, he tried to buy a 12-year-old Greek girl from her parents for £500 after he'd written this beautiful poem about being in love with these 3 Greek girls. It's like, yeah, right, she's 12. So at this point, when I got to this point in the research, I just thought, oh, you're just disgusting. And I maintain that that's it. That's my opinion. My opinion is that Byron was a bastard in every possible way. And yes, he wrote really beautiful poetry, some of which I love, particularly So We'll Go No More A-Roving. But he's one of those people where if he lived now, I would be going, well, I'll never buy anything from you again because I don't want to give you my money. And, you know, unfortunately, there's quite a lot of those people around, aren't there? So I am with Lady Caroline Lamb. Byron was mad, bad, and dangerous to know, particularly for attractive young children. Sorry. That's this week in the Regency. I'm Elizabeth Layton. I'll see you next week in the Regency.